Welcome to Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. Each week we bring you insights from the playmakers, deal makers, and rule makers in the world of sports. I'll give you my take on some of the items of the week using my 30 years of experience doing deals for teams, leagues, and players in the $750 billion business of sports. Plus, we'll talk with a central figure in the sports world. The views expressed in this podcast are my own and do not represent the views of Reuters. Let's get started. Rick Horrow, Keeping Score, as we do weekly, and Dan Colarusso is the big poobah digital editor at Reuters, and we continue to talk off air, and we have such interesting stuff, I think, that Dan can bring to the table off air that we've decided to continue to do it on air. How's that, Dan?
It sounds great to me. I like the poobah title, though. I have to have my business cards changed.
Is it two words? Is it poo and ba, or just
hyphenated?
Poobah?
Hyphenated.
Okay, good. Well, you heard it here first. Let's start with some interesting stuff. We have the Ryder Cup coming up next week. And the interesting stuff is not that Captain Davis Love has picked 11 guys, and the rumor is who he picks for his 12th is Tiger. But the interesting stuff is PGA of America brought Scouts Consulting on board to provide a laundry list of data based on who's playing their best, how players should be paired, what the course should look like. And the Ryder Cup European team, who knocked the snot out of us in the last round, has used them. So I guess this is a reason why we should use them, right?
Is this like money golf ball?
Yeah, it's money golf ball. It's exactly the same thing, except golf was supposed to be, right, one of those objective sports. You hit the ball X number of times, it goes in the hole. But yeah, it's like money golf ball.
The U.S. Ryder Cup team brings in these analytics, but yet they'll save the 12th spot for Tiger because he puts fannies on the greens, right? I mean, is that the idea?
Yeah, that's exactly the idea. They may not have chosen him yet, but they're gonna. And the bottom line is they're hoping, in crossing every finger, that the guy's going to play well, even though he hasn't had a competitive round in nearly a year, It
might be a tough sell, but, sometimes you go with your gut, and if that's what happens and it's Tiger, nobody's going to fault you for, putting Tiger in there.
At the high end, Jason Day is number one, and Dustin Johnson is number two. They're staying with Adidas. $100 million over the length of an agreement with Jason Day. He was a kid that really was kicked out of a boarding school in Australia as a young teenager, and now he's making $100 million before he swings his next club. It's a beautiful country, isn't it?
It's a fantastic country, and it's great to have Nike in it, right? They know how to brand.
Yeah. Nike didn't do this deal, but they ratcheted up the stakes to make TaylorMade, and then Nike, obviously $100 million, and then who's next? So the bottom line is Nike did this because other people did it, and Nike started it with Tiger.
Right. When they raised, they raised the ticket. They raise the price tag whenever they get into the game, and that bodes well for the top 10 players and whatever trickle down effect you get off that economy that develops.
All right, man, let's talk TV. So ESPN is going to begin the opportunity to let consumers stream certain games and things by choosing what they want to stream and basically pay for it. What do we think of that trend?
It's very much in step with everything, right? It seems like a natural furtherance to the, sports as must-see live TV. Let me direct it even more precisely to the viewers who care about it. And, it's sports. There are cult followings, and I may only want to watch SEC games. I may only want to watch Notre Dame games. I may only want to do that. And why shouldn't ESPN be able to cut that slice of it out and cash in? 5 years ago, ESPN didn't have to do this. It was enough to have live, and it was enough to take in however much it takes in from the carriers. Now, ESPN has to go meet them where they are. That's the key to all media and all distribution right now, is meeting your viewer, your user, where they're at on a device that they feel comfortable with. So you have to be everywhere, and you have to develop an economic model around each device or around each method of distribution that fits it. And I think ESPN, with the base of carriage fees and being owned by Disney, has that leverage right now in its pocket, and it has to make the move. I think it's a great move.
Well, television is clearly really important to sports, and we'll deal with that with the Green Bay Packers in a few minutes with our interview with Mark Murphy. But before we get there, let's have a little bit of fun. MLS club FC Dallas has struggled to get fans to Toyota Stadium in Dallas. So Commissioner Don Garber thought it was time to intervene. And he personally made some season ticket calls. It's the first time he's ever done it. He said the team needed to focus on attracting soccer fans who already live in North Texas. And imagine getting a call from the commissioner saying, what about your season tickets? Are you planning, by the way, to make calls to some future subscribers in India and try to close the deals?
I would, but the bigger question is, what does Jerry Jones think of that? Like,
Exactly. Let me get on the phone with my Dallas Cowboy ticket subscribers and say it's only going to cost you $20,000 for a box. Sign me up.
in the many hours each day I spend not thinking about golf or professional soccer in the United States, the spectacle of a commissioner, making calls. I mean, it's grassroots and it's interesting and it's a nice story. It's not a terrible story. But the issue is, how do you U.S. sports is used to scale. U.S. men's sports is used to scale and revenue. And how, it's weird being in a world where soccer is still clawing and scratching and feels like a second-tier sport. Even though Americans love it, they just don't particularly gravitate to the American brand of it.
Colarusso hates soccer, and one of the things that you're going to see him evolve into over the next few months is we're going to wear him down. He's going to be a soccer-loving executive editor. Am I right?
I do not hate it, but I lack the appreciation for it simply because I didn't grow up with it. I've never been able to catch up to it.
For those of us who have trouble quite understanding what the real difference between hating and not appreciating is, we're going to move on. The Vegas expansion NHL team, I was with Gary Bettman last night here in Toronto, and he's making that a legacy for him. There was a lot of discussion about whether or not Vegas could ever support a team, 16,000 season ticket owners. Desert Knights, Golden Knights, Silver Knights. What do you think the best name is going to be?
How about Endless Nights?
Boogie Nights. Yeah, I like Endless Nights. I think that's probably pretty good. We were kidding about blackjack or aces, and he didn't like that. And he's staying away from gambling names in a city where, from Gary Bettman's words, it's 2 million people who are family-oriented, who don't go to the casinos. They like the idea that the arena is not going to be near the casinos. The casinos are going to be supporting it, to be sure, but it'll be a family-oriented group of people who will go that have never gone before. What do you think? You think it has a shot in Vegas?
Vegas is a good sports town, I think, and they could have some more fun with the name. I don't know where it became such royalty, why it's so regal, and they need to be knights. But I think it's a good bet. Not to bad pun. It's a good bet for a sports town, and for hockey, where the arena's not huge. They're not talking about having to draw 45,000 3 nights a week like baseball. They're not talking about having to draw 75,000 on a Sunday. They're talking about a good 10 to 13,000 will make it a success.
Yeah, and the tourists are important, but not the reason the team exists. It's those 2 million family-oriented people, and they're already talking about growing the game and getting people to learn how to skate in a town that has no ice, which will be an interesting dynamic, but they do it in L.A. And so we'll see what happens with that. Now we go to a town that frankly shouldn't have any football at all, but it's Green Bay. It's the Green Bay Packers. It's the 10th most valuable franchise in the NFL with a $1.95 billion valuation. The Packers, $347 million of annual revenue. And why? Because of television. It's equal distribution of the TV money around the 32 teams. And, by the way, it's Titletown, USA. 13 championships, 4 Super Bowls. They have 1923, they had articles that say that if you sell the team, the expenses have to go to the Post of the American Legion, the Wallen Post, whatever that means. It's now the Packers Foundation. So it guarantees the team can't move, because if you sell it, it stays in town.
The Titletown, you mentioned Titletown, and doesn't that make all the difference? You look at it's the smallest major league city in America, right? By far. And you look at the Pittsburgh Pirates, who couldn't compete in the major leagues for so long, but they put a terrible product on the field for a better part of a decade. The Packers did for a while in the 70s and in the early 80s, but once the Brett Favre era started, would the Packers be this valuable if they weren't able to understand, if the economics didn't make it work for them to be a good team? They put a great product on the field, and football fans are loyal. Especially in a town like that. So I think the combination, we really haven't seen the combination of a small market team being at that level of excellence in the modern sports era. And I think that goes a long way. Their jersey sale revenue is probably pretty good. Combine that with the TV stuff, and I think it's a really unique story. And I listened to the interview you did with Mark Murphy, and I think he made some really interesting points. The one point that I think there are two that I thought were pretty interesting. One is that the Packers could almost never play a regular season game out of the United States, so the big NFL international push may leave the Packers behind because they can't take a game out of Green Bay, right? That was pretty interesting. And the shares thing, the publicly owned or community owned thing is cute, but it is the most expensive souvenir in sports. I mean, I could buy a Packers cap for $25 or buy a share of this, and essentially I get the same thing.
Yeah, you do. You get the same thing. The bottom line is, as you know, that there are basically 5 million shares outstanding. So a lot of people that out there, 360,000 stockholders. No one can hold more than 200,000 shares. So there are a lot of people that thought it was a kind of a cool Christmas present, and it is a greatest gift in sports, and it certainly helps. It's kind of like all of the leagues across the pond, because communities are a little more involved than they are with the other 31 NFL teams.
The difference between Green Bay and the football clubs in Europe is that Green Bay, Rick, when you go back to Harvard to teach a semester, that is a case study in building a brand from the ground up. Green Bay succeeds beyond any of the economic factors involved because it has developed a brand that kind of means something when you see it. It means authentic, cold weather, all-American football. And it says that more than any other franchise. Just seeing the helmet, seeing the colors, and seeing the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field says that in a way that not many things in sports continue to say that. There aren't many things like that left in major U.S. sports. And I think that they've cultivated that brand and understood its value is an interesting case study.
Great point, great brand, international interest in the brand, and Mark Murphy is significantly responsible for building that brand, and let's listen to what he has to say now. Forbes came out with their valuation of franchises around the world, and the Packers came in at 25th, not just in the NFL, clearly they're higher, they're 10th in the NFL according to that same measuring stick, but 25th out of 50 global franchises. So when you think about it, Green Bay, Wisconsin is in the same area awareness, economic par with Rome, with Paris, with franchises in Madrid, and it's incredible. And the current steward, and I mean that exactly as I said it once you find out the organizational structure, CEO Mark Murphy. Mark, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Welcome to Green Bay.
Well, it's really.
This is a nice time of year to be in Green Bay.
Well, it's by the way, it's one of the few summer days we have in Green Bay here, and it'll be great. So if
no frozen tundra.
By the way, Mark has invited me to play golf with him on January 15th here. I don't understand why he said that. I think it'll be fairly evident in the next few weeks. But so, describe for an international audience the difference between your position as CEO and who you report to versus the other other 31 teams in the NFL.
Yeah, every other team in the NFL, every other team in all professional sports in the United States, are owned by a single owner or a group of owners. But the Packers are owned by the community. The roots go back to the 1920s when wanted to make sure that the team stayed in Green Bay, so they had a series of stock sales, and had our fifth one in 2011. So we have 370,000 shareholders. As by the way, I understand you're one.
We'll be talking about that in a minute.
So let me know. You're my boss.
Yeah.
So if there's anything you'd like to do, let me know.
Maybe we'll see.
So I'm president, but so we don't have an owner, but we can't send 370,000 shareholders to the owners meetings. So I represent the Packers at the owners meetings, and my wife calls me a faux owner. So I'm an owner without the money. Is that what she says?
Yeah, but it's interesting. But you have the same administrative responsibilities as a president or chief executive officer of any of the other 31 teams in the NFL.
Yeah, the other presidents report to a single owner, and I report to shareholders, and of which there's a board of 45 active members, and then a number of committees, but most importantly, including an executive committee of 7, including myself. And that, I'd say the executive committee, along with our senior administration, really make the major decisions for the Packers.
And the other interesting dynamic of this is that the NFL is effectively a private corporation for those of you internationally, and it has 32 equal members, and one of those has public reporting requirements. Mm-hmm. So when the press basically wants to find out about numbers, revenue, and expenses from NFL teams, they can get the Packers numbers and use it as a measuring stick around the rest of the NFL.
Yeah, no, and it always comes out. We release our financial statements usually early July, And the national media, especially when we're like in the middle of collective bargaining or there's some issues at a league level, a lot of interest in it. But, you know, I think it shows the uniqueness of our organization. You know, the other thing I'd say, Rick, I mean, in addition to our ownership structure, the other thing that's so unique about it is that we're such a small community. I mean, it's by far the smallest market in the NFL. Not even close. I mean, Buffalo is the second smallest, and they're quite a bit bigger. But then also, I would say our history and tradition. You know, we've won more championships than any other team in the NFL, 13. And Lambeau Field. We set a record last year. Previous record was the year following our Super Bowl victory. We had 135,000 people take tours. But this past year, we had 175,000 people take tours of Lambeau Field.
Oh, you won a Super Bowl? Oh, you won 4 Super Bowls and 13 NFL championships, I think is the right answer. So when Mark talks about legacy, he really means it. And he may call himself a faux owner. I'm a faux journalist. I forgot to tell you that if you hang on to this entire broadcast, we're really talking about the economics not only of a publicly owned, community-owned company, but also how it impacts by far the smallest town in the National Football League and its region, 104,057 according to the last census. And Mayor Schmidt, who will be on after Mark, knows every one of those people personally, which is one of the reasons why he's been elected for 45 or 46 straight terms. We'll get into that in a few minutes. But it is an amazing, incredible combination. So when you're at NFL owners' meetings and you vote as the governor like the other 31, do they look at you differently? Do they look at you and say, here's the guy without money?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. You know, before I went to my first owners meeting, I've been in my position about almost 9 years. I wondered, you know, what are those meetings like? Because especially having played in the league and then being involved in the Players Association, I always kind of wondered what it was like. But it's really not. It's not that much different than any other meetings or business meetings. But in terms of how the Packers are viewed, I think there's an awareness that, you know, we're kind of different. And I especially noticed that when we had the stock sale in 2011, we had to get approval from the owners. And so we kind of went through the stock sale and what we anticipated, what we'd use the money that we raised for. And during the middle of it, Jerry Jones stood up and said, "Mark, can you explain to us how that works?"
No.
It's like, that's a pretty good idea. I'd like to do it. I said, well, no, this is the only, because we're the only ones that could have a stock sale like this. But it works well for us. The other thing I would say, I think because of the success that the Packers have had, primarily on the field, but also off the field, you know, we're by far the smallest market, but the last 3 years in a row now, we've been number 9 in the league in terms of total revenue. Right. So even though we're a small market, we've been able to generate revenue at a fairly high level that I think there's a level of respect for the Packers within the room.
Talk about that for a second, then we'll get back to the stock specifics. Television contract, about $5 billion, 4.4 to $5 billion annually. Mm-hmm. It's a lot bigger than the MLBs or the NBAs, but even more important, that is shared equally among the 32 teams.
Yep.
And so that number, and if I'm right, it's the visiting team share at 40%, the home team at 60%. Effectively, ticket sales and television are shared almost equally, if not equally, relative to the splits.
Yep.
And so if that didn't happen, there'd be no Green Bay Packers. There'd be Packers.
Going back,
else.
there's no question the league's revenue sharing model has been very, very positive for the Packers. And to me, it's the biggest advantage that the NFL has as a league. You know, we've got a revenue sharing model that works. We've got a salary cap. We've got a relationship with our Players Association that works very well. So we're very fortunate. The popularity of the game is pretty remarkable, especially in terms of television. You know, I forget exactly, but 2 or 3 years ago, I think of the 35 highest-rated television programs, 34 were NFL
what was the other
games.
One?
I think it was the Academy Awards. Yeah. But
that was
so
terrible.
That was
boring. That year the Academy Awards was boring, but you know, it's an interesting perspective, and it's stabilized. Talk a little bit about Twitter and social media and all the things that the NFL is trying to do to increase revenue, knowing that this is basically reality television, and it's the only real reality television left.
Yeah, you know, I mean, the league has taken a lot of steps in recent years to reach out, to have more ways for fans to engage with them. I mean, going back, it was started a number of years ago, but it's really starting to bear fruit, particularly now as the NFL Network. 24 hours a day, year round. We just did an experiment with Twitter. And you're going to have to bear with me here. I'm not up on all the terms, but it was an over-the-top broadcast. So.
That's a good start. Keep going.
And but what was good about it? So it was we wanted to see what it was like. And what that really does, and this is kind of ties into another big initiative for the league, is the international. Yeah. So, when you're on broadcast networks or cable, the time, it's really just in the United States. But and it was a London game last year, was broadcast live on the internet and over-the-top broadcast. And it really opened up the world, and so
not
the games.
Not the world's best game.
Jaguars and Buffalo.
Yeah,
hey, I'm a Bills fan now. I grew up in Buffalo. Come on.
I know, but it was still. Yeah. And the Jaguars played pretty well in the second half. Yeah. But still.
But I think they had 17 million people. Yeah. So it was, and because of the game, I think it was an afternoon game in London, prime time in Asia. You had it really opened up the NFL to a very broad market. So I think you're going to see a lot of changes in the coming years in terms of media, and also a much bigger push to have more games international.
And you're going to start learning a few other words like TriCast and appealing to the cord cutters, right?
Yeah.
Because the bottom line of what happens
it's all driven by the millennials.
Yeah. There you go. It's got the whole combination.
Well, the league was really smart with the Thursday. Yeah. So we did long-term deals with Fox, CBS, NBC, and for the traditional Sunday broadcast, Sunday night, Monday night. And then we kept the Thursday kind of to experiment, and I think it's really been beneficial.
And NFL Network, and then CBS, NBC split.
Yeah, and this year it's going to be split, like you said, a TriCast. It's going to be CBS, NBC, NFL Network, and Twitter. Yeah. So you're going to. I can't even tell you what it's going to. Yeah. There's 18 games, and they're splitting it up, but it's really. Pretty progressive thinking on the league's part to get as much exposure as possible.
Internationally, Roger Goodell challenged his staff to generate $25 billion in annual revenue by the end of the labor agreement. He may or may not make it, but no matter if he gets close, that's pretty good. Internationally,
to put it in perspective, we're at 12 now.
Yeah, I
understand.
And
we've got 5 years to go on this.
5 years, way to go, but everybody wakes up. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
So internationally, team in Mexico, team in London, where's that all shake out?
That's a good question. We've had great success in London. Yeah. Unfortunately, the Packers have not played there yet. Yeah. So I would be hung in effigy, or I would actually, not even effigy, I'd be hung if we took a home game out of Green Bay. I mean, it means so much. Home games mean so much to the market here that we would never give up a home game. But then the other thing is our fans travel so well to away games that teams that are going to be playing a game against the Packers in their stadiums don't want to give up a game against the Packers. Yeah. So we haven't been able to, and there's been a couple other franchises that I know the league wants to get.
It's hard being an international icon.
Yeah,
you want to hear, basically.
So the games, every game in London is sold out. I mean, it's highly successful. I just think in terms of having a franchise there, I think there are some pretty major logistical issues that need to be worked out.
But time to do it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think, how does it work? What's it look like? We're going to have a game in Mexico City this year, regular season game, and then 2018 there'll be a regular season game in China. So we're moving in that direction.
And the teams who don't have the iconic and cultural commitment to all of those home games, they're the ones that volunteer. So I know the Rams are opening up in China. I don't know if it's officially announced, but that's the...
Well, what the league can do, under the league policy, there's a couple different situations. If you're playing in a temporary stadium, like the Rams are, the league can require you to play an international game. I think if you've hosted a Super Bowl, the same thing. Because they want to have a number of international games, and I'm not sure there's finding enough teams willing to give up the home games is a challenge.
So the other piece of this too is, Real Madrid just cut that $1.6 billion 10-year kit deal with Adidas, and are you jealous that why not us? When are we going to start? We have opportunities to do logos on practice jerseys. When are we going to do it for real? Is that a revenue source in the foreseeable future or not?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I think, particularly at the league level, we're tracking. You know, I think the NBA is starting to move in that direction. And it's a healthy tension between generating revenue and the football side, you know, doing what's right for the game of football. You know, I do, quite honestly, worry a little bit about overexposure. But, you know, I mean, the ratings continue to be very strong. But, you know, it's... Yeah, it's just we have a lot of games, and they're a lot on you know, on prime time. But as long as the public continues to watch, I think we'll be continuing to offer them.
And they do. Let's shift back just for a few minutes to me being your boss. So I got this in the mail.
And by the way, I think you missed a deadline.
Well, but all right. You know what? It's going to be irrelevant because I've opened it before, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. But I think I'm still going to be okay. So here's the deal.
That's your biggest right. Your biggest right is to vote at the annual meeting.
I know who I'm voting for. So here's the deal. There's no equity, ladies and gentlemen. You can't resell. There are basically no extended voting rights. You can vote at the annual meeting, but only for the slate that's provided for you. There's no securities law protection. And more important than anything else, there is a waiting list of 86,000 people and no season ticket privileges. So I want you to know...
I hate to tell you, the waiting list has gone up to 128,000.
Because I'm getting a lawyer anyway. I am getting a lawyer before I open this up. Seriously, it is a testament to an interesting gift, but it's also a testament to symbolizing how important the Packers are to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I mean, you know, and I've seen so many pictures people send me. It's a source of pride. They hang the certificates up in their, usually in their man caves or in their basement. I should say fan cave.
Fan cave. Man or woman cave. Yeah. Nobody can hold more than 200,000 shares?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that correct? So you don't have a monopoly there. As of last, you still have some outstanding shares, or is that have they all been sold?
Everything's been sold, and you know, as I said before, you know, any stock sale in the future has to be approved by the league. I mean, that's the concern with the league is, well, other teams can't do it. No. If we had stock sales every year, we could use that to give ourselves a competitive advantage. So, and the last one. We used that for our south end zone expansion. So all the money that was raised went right into the stadium.
Well, speaking of expansion, well, but first, before the whole stadium issue, which is really important to kind of end on thematically. 1919 is your 100th year history anniversary. What are you doing special?
We've got a special committee. We've got a number of different. If I told you, I would be in. Yeah, I wouldn't.
But it's got to be big.
Yeah, I'd be in trouble.
It's got to be big.
It's going to be huge.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we got that, and then there have been, as far as I could tell, 8 or 9 expansions of Lambeau since you originally started it, and you played at Bellevue Park and Hagemeister Park, and those are not relevant because that was back in 1921. At least I've done my history. Yeah. But you've had effectively large expansions, including the one I was lucky enough to work on in the early 2000s, where you really spent $150 million or so of Brown County tax money. We'll talk to the mayor about that as well. Yeah. But this is not a stadium. It's a museum. In a way. It's really a public-private partnership.
Well, you know, you're right. Well, the 2003 renovation really changed Lambeau Field from a facility that was just used on, 10 days a year for the home games, the regular season and preseason, to now, it's used year-round. With the atrium here and the meeting space we have, we had over 700 events last year.
And Titletown, you're building that? That's just west of Lambeau?
And really to build on the success of the atrium and Lambeau Field. And with our Hall of Fame now, I mentioned the tours. We've got a great restaurant, 1919 Kitchen and Tap, and our pro shop. And, it's really not anything like it that I know of in professional sports.
Well, that's the point. And the other issue, too, which is interesting, is whether they do it or not, most teams use the end of a lease term as leverage to threaten to go elsewhere. The 1923 Articles of Incorporation originally said that if there were any post-expense proceeds on sale, and there's a lot given the average franchise net worth today is $2 billion, they would go to the Sullivan Wallen Post of the American Legion, and it was changed to the Packers Foundation. So you really can't get out of town even if you wanted to.
No, well, we have 2 main goals. The first one's to win championships, Super Bowls, and the other one is to make sure the team stays in Green Bay. And, so that's very unique. As you said, it's very different with other teams.
How close were you when the team played the 6 games in Milwaukee every year? And then there was the deal to renovate here, and the deal was you play all the games here. And that was it.
No, I think that was a tough decision. And the decision was made in the early '90s to play all the games here, And just from talking to people, I think it was hard on the players, on coaches. It was 3 games a year in Milwaukee, but it was like having additional road games. Plus, with the big investment that we've made now in Lambeau Field, I think it just made sense to have everything here.
So he's a hero in Green Bay. He's predicted off camera a Super Bowl championship by 1919 for the 100th. No, he didn't. But he is an icon.
That would be very nice, though, if we. But I would want one before then. With
before then, too, clearly, and you have the team that has the capability of doing it too, obviously. What's next for Mark Murphy? How long are you doing this?
I just turned 61, but really enjoy doing it, and it's such a unique organization, and as long as I'm healthy and continue to feel that I'm continuing contributing to improving the organization, I'd be happy to keep doing it.
Well, I'm really excited that I've nuzzled up to Mark Murphy today in this interview, and so. Can I get some more equity in that?
Why don't you give me this and I'll vote for it?
I get equity.
The shareholder meeting was in July.
July. I'm burning this, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know anything. So no equity. I can't resell.
You get discounts at the pro shop.
At the pro shop
on special shareholder apparel.
Team playing? No team playing.
No tickets.
No tickets. No. Nothing. All right. Well, you know what? We're done. Thanks for listening to this edition of Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. The producer of the show, Alex Cohen. Associate producer, Bethel Habte. Assistance provided by Tanner Simpkins and Carlos Waddick. And the executive editor of Reuters Digital, Dan Colarusso.